So, Tsoureki, this is an amazing Greek bread made from an enriched dough with a couple of other key ingredients, but this fills the bakery shelves here, and for very good reason. The smell alone is reward enough for baking this bread. Well listen, thank you very much for tuning in guys. My name's Philip. Let's give this Tsoureki a bit of a closer look. Right, so this recipe makes one large loaf of Tsoureki. Now in my pan I've got 100 grams of full fat milk, that's got a fat content of 3.5%. And to that I'm just going to add a few splashes of vanilla essence and then follow up with 50 grams of caster or granulated white sugar. Then we can add 75 grams of diced butter. Now I don't like my enriched breads too sweet, so if you wanted to increase the sugar content slightly you could. Now we can add in a good pinch or 5 grams of sea salt, and this is gently going to warm through on the hob until that salt and the sugar has dissolved and the butter's melted. Right, so in my bowl I've got 500 grams of strong white flour. Mine's got a protein content of 13%. You can use different flours. You may need to adjust the milk content slightly, but I will leave details on that in the description. Now to that I've added an 8 gram sachet of dried yeast. This is 8 grams of Mahlepi or Mahlepi powder. Now this comes from the inner kernel of a cherry pit, and you can find it online, and I'll leave some links in the description box. Now here I've got 1 gram of Mastica. Now you definitely don't want to go crazy with this ingredient because it can be really overpowering. Now again, I'll leave links to this in the description as well. You'll normally find this in a crystal form, so it's good just to give it a quick breakdown in a pestle and mortar, and then I'm actually going to add that to the milk just to make sure it's well dissolved. Now we can add the grated zest of 1 orange and the grated zest of 1 lemon, and don't forget to keep an eye on your milk and butter mixture. As soon as your sugar and your salt has dissolved and the butter's melted, just make sure the milk isn't too hot, just wants to be warm to the touch. We can crack in a couple of eggs and then add in the remainder of the milk, which is 120 grams, and that's fridge cold. Grab yourself a fork, give it a quick mix up to make sure everything's well whisked together. Add this into our flour mixture and then we can give it a good mix around. I use a bowl scraper, but you could use a spoon, and the idea here as ever is just to make sure all of the ingredients are really well incorporated and there's no kind of dry patches of flour. Then we're going to cover this. We're just going to leave it out at room temperature just to chill out for about 20 minutes to make sure that flour gets nicely hydrated, which is going to make that kneading process just that little bit easier. So we can get this flipped out onto our bench. We're not using any bench flour whatsoever. Now this dough is going to feel a little bit oily and a little bit sticky to start with, but we're just going to use the heel of our hand and we're going to work it for about 5 minutes or so. We're not looking to build up lots and lots of strength, but we definitely want to make sure that the butter's been well emulsified into this dough. It's not sticky, it's nice and smooth. So just using the heel of a hand, we're just going to work over it, pushing it away from us and then just folding it back up. In fact, whatever method works best for you. Now your bench scrape is going to be your best friend here, so if you haven't got one, you definitely should, because when we're not using bench flour, obviously it sticks to the bench a lot, and that scraper just helps us clean up any bits of sticky mess. And at this point you're going to be getting smacked with all of those aromas from the orange zest, the lemon zest, the mastica. This is a really, really nice dough to work with. It smells beautiful. Now we're just going to keep working this, as I say, and once you feel everything come together, we can just pull it round and work it into a smooth ball. That's going to go back into our bowl. It's going to be covered and it's going to be left out to prove at room temperature. Now my kitchen temperature today is 20 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is going to take approximately 2 hours to prove. So this did take 2 hours to prove. Just remember those times may be different depending on your temperatures, and here you can see it's puffed up nicely. We've got a nice dome on the top, and honestly it smells absolutely fantastic. So again, we're going to get this turned out onto our bench, and then I'm going to weigh the dough mass. I'm going to divide it by 3 and then cut it up into equal portions. Now, of course, you don't need to weigh this. You can eyeball it. I just find you get more even strands if you weigh it. Now roll each piece into a rough sausage shape. We're going to leave them out on the bench covered with a piece of plastic just to rest for about 10 minutes. Same process again, take a piece of dough, roll it over into a nice tight sausage shape, sealing it as you go, and then repeat with the other 2 pieces. Now you can take each piece of dough and we can form it into a longer sausage. So using our hands from the center, we're going to push down gently and work our hands out towards the outside. Doesn't need to be perfect at this stage because we're going to let them rest again. So just work out from the center towards the outside and then again repeat with the other two pieces of dough. Cover them with our piece of plastic and we're just going to leave them to rest for another 5 or 10 minutes. So this is the last shape, I promise, but you know what, those little rests that we've just done really help. They just let that gluten relax and they make this shaping a lot easier, I promise you. So again, starting at the center, we just rotate that dough forwards and backwards and push our hands gently towards the outside. Now my dough pieces ended up being about 60 centimeters long. Take the pieces of dough, place them next to each other, and we're just going to perform a simple braid. So a simple braid, I've got two pieces positioned at the top and I've got a gap and then another piece at the bottom. Take the top one, fold it over the middle one and place it just above the bottom one and then repeat with the bottom. Lift it over the middle one and place it just underneath the top one. And you're going to continue to do this top to bottom, bottom to top, working down the entire braid. Now it's really important to make sure that this braid is nice and tight. You almost want a bit of height when you lift it over and place it over the center one, and that's going to allow this to prove upwards and not necessarily spread out on the baking tray. Now you're going to continue until you get to the end. You're going to seal those three pieces of dough together and then just go back to the other end, tidy up those braids and make sure they're nicely sealed together as well. As I say, we've got a nice tight plait. Right, pick the braid up, pop it onto a non-stick baking tray or a Teflon mat or some non-stick baking paper, and then just tidy that plait up again, and then we're going to give it a good egg wash all the way over. Take a bit of time, make sure that you've covered all the outside of that dough. We're going to cover this and we're going to leave it to prove again at room temperature for around the 1.5 to 2 hours mark. Right, so this did prove for 2 hours. I'm going to give it another egg wash. I'm going to sprinkle it with flaked almonds, and this is going to bake in the center of a preheated oven set to bake mode with no fan turned on. The temperature is set at 170 degrees Celsius or 340 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to bake for about 45 minutes, but you'll need to keep an eye on it. You want to make sure that this cooks all the way through but doesn't go too dark on the top because we've got an egg wash. So my tip is to take an oven tray and place it between the top of the dough and the heating element, and that's just going to protect that dough as it cooks and stop it getting too much color too soon. So a fantastic enriched bread there. This is one to give a go, and if you do, then let me know in the comments what you think. As ever, tag me over on Instagram. But for now, a huge thank you for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Stay tuned. You're still with me all the time.